moving into the next chapter, chapter number 15. So the name of the chapter is Biodiversity and Conservation. So what is the chapter? Biodiversity and Conservation. So this biodiversity you have already learned. What is biodiversity? Biodiversity means what? Diversity, which means differences, varieties. Okay. So biodiversity. Bio is what? It is life. So there is different forms of life at different levels. Like there will be differences within a species. There will be differences between different species. There will be differences in from one area to the another area, like ecological diversity. So you can find the biodiversity and conservation. The biodiversity is the big term which is referring to the species richness, the different varieties of organisms which are present on the earth. Okay. Now this biodiversity and conservation, in this chapter we are going to learn about the different types of biodiversity. Then what are the different causes for biodiversity loss? What are the different conservation methods? Okay, patterns of biodiversity. All these things we are going into this chapter. So to move on to this chapter, I have already told you what is biodiversity. Now who is the one who has given this word biodiversity? It was given by who? Edward Wilson. Who has given it? It is Edward Wilson is the one who has given the term what? Biodiversity. Now when you are seeing this biodiversity, it is of 3 levels. Okay. So there are 3 levels of biodiversity. So what are the 3 levels? The first one is the genetic level. Second one is your species level. And third one is your ecological level. Okay. So first one is genetic diversity. Second one is species diversity. And the third one is what? Ecological diversity. Okay. So what is genetic diversity? Genetic diversity means variety in the different forms of genes, because of which there is differences in characters of different organisms within a single species. Okay. So humans, when you are saying I am not resembling other, I am different from other. Even if I am twins, in that case also I may be differing from my sister in some way or the other. So I am varying because of differences in the gene. Okay, gene sequences, characters, I am different. No individual is same. So everyone is unique in its composition, isn't it? So that is what we call it as what? Genetic diversity. So within a population, within a species, if there is variation, we call it as what? We call it as genetic biodiversity. Okay. Now what is this genetic biodiversity? Given an example, it has been discussed. Okay. So in Himalayan region, one of the variety one of these species is present. The name of the species is a plant species, Rauwolfia vomitoria. Okay. So this Rauwolfia vomitoria, which is present in the Himalayan region as well as in some other places, India, are having different types of varieties. Means there are Rauwolfia vomitoria is not one the same. There are different varieties of the same plant. That this different variety of the same plant is producing. How they are varying? They are varying dependent on the chemical which it is secreting. What is the chemical? The name of the chemical is reserpine. What is the name of the chemical? It is reserpine. Now this reserpine, when you are seeing, what is the role of this reserpine? They are helping in reducing our heartbeat and blood pressure. So the composition as well as how much it is, it varies from what? One variety to another variety of Rauwolfia vomitoria, the same species only, but based on the varieties you can find that composition will differ. How much concentration they are producing will differ. So there is differences. Rice, when you see, there are around 50,000 varieties of rice, 1,000 varieties of mangoes, isn't it? So all are not tasting the same, all are not appearing the same. There are varieties. So this one we call it as what? Genetic diversity. Diversity in the gene. Okay. Next we are moving on to species diversity. What do you mean by the term species biodiversity? Species means within a species, means different types of, not within, between. Different species there is differences. Okay. Like for example, when you are seeing amphibians. Okay. So amphibians is a group of organisms. In that you can find many different types of species, isn't it? So this amphibian varieties, when you are seeing, it's not same everywhere. Like even in India, if you are considering, you can find in the Western Ghats, the number of species of amphibians is far more compared to what? The Eastern Ghats. Which means that The species is also not the same everywhere. The species diversity differ from what? Place to place. You can find different types of species in different region at different rates. Okay. So, if there is differences in the diversity of species, then we call it as what? We call it as species diversity. Again, India, the same thing you cannot find in America, the same thing you cannot find in Africa, right? Different species are different. Now, moving on to the next level of biodiversity is your ecosystem, ecological biodiversity or ecological diversity. Now, what do you mean by ecological diversity? Which means my place, India only I am considering. Okay, so my country, India, our country, India, we are considering. Now, in this place also you can find there are diversity. How there are diversity? Desert is not equivalent to hills. It's not equivalent to alpine meadows. Alpine meadows means in the hilly areas, grasslands and all, it will be different, isn't it? So forest is totally different, right? So you have grassland, you have desert, you have forest, you have hills, you have plains. So all these places, it's different variety. Based on that, the organisms also differ. So higher level, that is ecosystem level, comes to what? Higher biodiversity. So the desert, as well as when you are seeing the forest, the animal will not be related to one another. They will have a different type of adaptation. Okay. So these are what? The three levels of biodiversity. Number one was genetic level. Number two, genetic level, species is same, the varieties are different. Number two, species diversity, which means species are different types of species. Then is ecosystem. Ecosystem is what? Different type of what is biotic community. You can find a community like setup. A higher one, okay? So like desert, forest, hills, grasslands are all coming under what? It's coming under ecosystem diversity, right? Now, moving on to the next term, global species diversity. So what do you mean by global species? Global means I am taking the whole globe, means the whole earth, okay? So in this whole earth, when you are saying there is much different organisms in different setups. Now, according to IUCN, okay, so what is the full form for International Union of Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources, okay, IUCN. So in 2004, it estimated that around 1.5 millions of species are present on the whole earth. But one person named as Robert May, he is saying that around 7 millions of species will be there on the earth, yet to be discovered. Some are present somewhere where humans cannot reach. Okay, so like that they are saying that around 7 million types of varieties of species may be present in the earth. Okay, and in this, the thing to note is that around 70% of them are animals. Okay, and only 22% is what? It is plants. So 70% is animals and 22% is plants. Out of the 70% animals you see, around most of them are insects. They are falling under which category? Insect. So if you are taking 10 animals, in this 10 animals, 7 will be insect. The rest will be, 3 will be some other animals. Okay. So 70% is animal. In that, round how much? More is what? It's insect. Okay. So if you are taking approximately around 70% of the animals, in that much will be what? The insects. Now in the other one will be the plants. Okay. Now when you are moving into the Indian biodiversity or Indian species diversity, you can find our area is occupying only 2.4% of the world's area. So the area which we are occupying is very less. How much percentage is this total world area? When you are saying it's only 2.4%. But out of this 2.4% land area, what we have, around 8.1% global biodiversity we are contributing, which means I am having 2.4 area, but my species, when you are seeing the species which are present in India is around 8.1. In the world, if you are taking 100% is there, in that our Indian place is contributing how much? It is 8.1%. Okay. So like this, the global species diversity, when you are seeing, it varies from place to place, and when you are seeing animals are more compared to plants. In your textbook, you would have seen a diagram. Okay. So this is a diagram. So the diagram depicts a graph. Okay, it's a graph which is showing different representation of global species biodiversity. The first case, when you are seeing, the first one is depicting what? It is depicting First one is depicting the invertebrates, the graph. So this invertebrates, when you're seeing, in that you see which one is more, the insects. Okay, so the insects are more compared to molluscs, crustacean, any other groups of invertebrates. In that the insects are more. Okay, so just go through the graph. They will be giving you A, B, C, D and to fill it up. Okay, so other one is your next one is your vertebrates. So in this vertebrates you see which one is the highest, the fishes. Fishes are coming highest compared to the mammals, birds, reptiles and amphibians. Which is the highest? It is the fishes. Now when you are moving on to the plants variety, you can find fungi, okay, as well as the angiosperms are occupying the huge numbers. And when you are seeing the bryophytes, that is mosses, ferns and alliums are pteridophytes, isn't it? Thereafter algae, they are occupying, lichens, they are occupying less. Okay. So this graphs you have to just go through, because you will be given A, B, C, D. In that you have to identify which is A, which is B, and which is more and which is less. You need to have some idea about the C. Okay. Yeah. So next we are moving on to patterns of biodiversity.
Before moving into the patterns of biodiversity, we will just discuss what we have already discussed. Okay, students. So the chapter is what? Biodiversity and conservation. In that, what is biodiversity? It can be defined as the totality of genes. So whatever the genes are present, different species or different types of ecosystem, all differences, varieties, we call it as what? Biodiversity. Okay. So this biodiversity can be studied at how many levels? 3 levels, isn't it? So what are the 3 levels? One is genetic diversity, second one is species diversity, and another one is what? Ecological or ecosystem diversity. So we saw what are the 3 levels. Genetic level, it is the measure of variety in genetic information. Genetic information means what? Between the gene, okay, gene there is differences. Between organisms, I am different from other because of the genetic differences. Okay, so that is genetic diversity, and we discussed regarding reserpine, active chemical which is found in Raufolfia vomitoria. Okay, and species diversity, moving on to the second one, variety of species and the relative abundance in a area. Okay, so how many are present, how much is present, the species, the different types of species which are present in a particular area, we call it as the species diversity, different types of species. So in that we discussed about amphibian species, which is more in Western Ghats compared to Eastern Ghats. Clear? And then we discussed about what? Ecological diversity. So what is ecological diversity? You know, measure of diversity at community and ecosystem level, we call it as what? Ecological diversity. Okay, so this ecological diversity as such, India is concerned, it is diverse in nature because of the presence of different types of biome like desert, rainforest, coral reefs, wetlands, estuaries and alpine meadows. So everywhere you can find there is diversity, differences. Okay, so that is regarding the 3 levels of biodiversity. Now we are moving on to the global biodiversity. We discussed IUCN, International Union of Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources. It has in 2004 estimated these many million species will be present, but correct to some extent estimate is made by Robert May. He said that about 7 million plant means put together you can find different types of species will be present. In this, out of the species you can find most of them are animals. Okay, 70% of them are animals and 22% are what is that, the plants. Okay, in this animals also more is insects. This we have already discussed, right? Now when you are moving on to biodiversity in India, it is the 12th mega biodiversity country in the world, in which you can find our area is only 2.4%, but when you are seeing we are having contributing the number of species which we are giving to the world is 8.1%. Compared to the area, the species diversity is very, very high. Okay, and now also yet to be discovered, many new species are there which are yet to be discovered and added to the list. Okay, so this is regarding biodiversity in India, and this is a graph which so a pie chart or graph you can call, which is representing the different types of organisms which are present. So invertebrates, when you are seeing, insects are occupying most position, isn't it? Thereafter you can find molluscs, crustacean, other animals groups are having occupying the rest levels. So here you will get A, B, C, D and all like that. We have to write it down. I told you vertebrates, when you are seeing the pisces is 50% is being taken by whom? The pisces. The others are occupying the rest of the thing. Okay, and plants, when you are seeing, fungi is occupying the most, followed by angiosperm. Mosses or bryophytes, you can find that is the next. Ferns and leaves are pteridophytes, right? And algae and lichens. Okay, so these are the means how much they are distributed, that is the representation of biological diversity. Okay, so the global representation of biodiversity is given in the form of a pie chart. Okay, so this is regarding invertebrates, vertebrates and plants, how it is available. Now we are moving on to the next topic, that is patterns of biodiversity. What we are going to learn in this patterns of biodiversity, we are going to learn two patterns. One is the latitudinal gradient, and another one what we are going to learn is species area relationship. So two patterns of biodiversity we are going to learn. Okay, so what are they? One is the latitudinal gradient and another one is what we are going to learn, species area relationship. Okay, so patterns of biodiversity, when you are seeing the biodiversity, the species are not similar whole throughout the year. It varies from place to place. The species, when you are seeing, they are varying with latitude as well as altitude. Altitude means, you know, its height. Okay, as you move from the plains to the hilltops, the species will be varying. Latitude is also, you would have seen the globe, isn't it? So various latitude from the equator you can find to the south as well as the north, a different latitude are present, isn't it? So that latitude, when you move up higher or come down, what happens is that the species will be varying from one latitude to other. Okay, and favorable environmental condition is helping in what? Speciation. What is meant by speciation? A new species is developed. Okay, so from already existing species, a new species is coming into existence. So the speciation is possible only if the climatic factors, the habitat is favoring the growth. Okay, their growth, their reproduction, their change in the gene is being taken care. In that case only what is happening, the speciation is possible, and larger number of species can exist together only if they have favorable conditions available in the environment or in their surrounding. Okay, so biodiversity will be more where what is present, favorable environmental conditions are present. Favorable means what? Good environmental conditions are present. In that the biodiversity will be more. Where the conditions, the climatic condition, the geographical conditions are not that good, there the organisms will be less. Okay, so latitudinal diversity gradient, when you are saying organisms, when you are seeing diversity tends to be highest near the equator. So the which one is the highest? Near the equator, when you are seeing, they will be highest, and you as move away from the equator towards the pole, what happens is that the species richness, the number of species will be going on diminishing. Diminishing means what? They will be going on decreasing. Okay. Now the question arises, why is so special? What is the speciality of the tropical region? Tropical means what here? Tropic of Cancer, Tropic of Capricorn, from the equator, this region. Okay, than the temperate. Temperate means this one, and the tip ones are polar, isn't it? So than the temperate or polar region, why there are more species in the tropics? Okay, so that is a very important question regarding latitudinal gradient. Okay, so in the tropics there are more species compared to what? The temperate or polar region. What is the reason for greater biodiversity there? So the ecologist and evolutionary biologist, what they have proposed, different hypotheses. Okay, they are giving some hypothesis. Why? Hypothesis means maybe this is the reason. Okay, so the first reason is that the tropical latitudes have remained relatively undisturbed for millions of years and thus had a long evolutionary time for species diversification. Like for example, imagine this one is the tropic. Okay, so this is the tropic. This tropic, when you are seeing, there is no glaciation. Glaciation means what? Ice, glaciers are formed, ice. All of a sudden there is a change in the temperature. No, the tropics usually they have a uniform range of temperature. It's not that cold during winter, and when you are seeing they can, to some extent the temperature fluctuations are very less. To some extent they have a moderate average type Maybe it's going a bit higher as well as a bit lower, but then also it's not like poles. Poles will go minus degrees and all, much less the temperature can go to. Glaciation and all can occur, but here it is not going to occur. So here when you are seeing, they are relatively undisturbed. Undisturbed means what? They are not disturbed by the climatic events much, okay, because ice are not formed. When this ice is formed, what happens is that only those who can adapt to the changing conditions survive, others will die. So here when you are seeing a sudden change in the temperatures and all will not be occurring. They are less seasonal in nature. So that is the thing for which you can find in the tropical areas species diversity is more, because they can adjust to the changes. Slowly, gradually they adjust and they adapt and they give rise to a new species. Like that it will be forming, okay. And the species reproductive rate will also be good, because there is no change in the environmental condition all of a sudden, okay. Next is that tropical environment like temperate zone are less seasonal. Seasonal means I told you, like in the polar region and all, when you are seeing that winter is like real winter, isn't it? But at the same time when you are seeing the tropics and all, it's not having much amount of temperature and all will not be fluctuation will not be there. Yes, maybe they're 10 degrees that side, this side and all, but then also it's not like polar. So they are less seasonal, okay, and they are more constant in nature. Constant means what? Fluctuation is very less, okay. Average when you are seeing, somewhat it's okay, and it is predictable. Predictable means all of a sudden a snowfall will not happen, okay. So to some extent we can predict the weather, okay. Based on that we can make necessary changes. But in the polar as well as the temperate region, it is not like that. There the weather is not predictable. All of a sudden you can find some environmental disaster is taking place, okay, so ice caps are broken, like that changes happen, because of which the species are very less in the temperate as well as that areas, okay. And the next is there is more solar energy available. Another one important thing regarding this is that in the tropics when you are seeing what is available, the solar energy is available. So this is the equator, though you can find this is the sun, isn't it? So if this is the sun, so direct rays of sun is falling over the equator and only slanting rays is falling towards the poles and the temperate region. So if the direct rays of the suns are falling, you know what is the importance of sun? Sun is the main source of energy. Who is producing food? The plants are producing food with the help of this light energy. These temperate and polar region, they get slanting rays of light, which means the energy which is provided to them is very less. Now if the plants is not there, we are directly or indirectly dependent on whom? The plants, isn't it? So if the plants can photosynthesize, only then what the animals can do? The animals can get the food. So a species have to survive means what is needed? Food is needed. Who is going to produce the food? The plant. So for the plant to make food, what is important raw material? One of the important raw material, it is sunlight. Since this equator region, the tropical regions are getting the direct rays of the sun, the productivity, okay, the photosynthetic rate is greater, because of which you can find in the tropics, if the plants are more, automatically the other tropic levels in the food chain will also be more. Why? Because they are getting the food for survival, okay. But that is not the case in case of what? Temperate as well as polar region. Hope it's clear. So today we discussed about what is biodiversity, the 3 levels of biodiversity. Then we discussed about global biodiversity, Indian biodiversity, and then we discussed about patterns of biodiversity. The first one, that is latitudinal gradient. In the next class, we will be discussing about species area relationship. Okay, thank you.